Welcome back, fellow travelers, to the logbook of a simple lindworm traveler. I am Krotnip, and today I am here to talk about the second character added to the Northern Tribes through the Warcrow Adventures dungeon crawler game, and that is Iriavik and her pet Kurgan Cole. So, who is Iriavik? As already stated, Iriavik is one of the character adventurers from the board game Warcrow Adventures. She does have something of a different backstory to most of the Varanks, however, since she wasn't effectively brought up in the Boreal lands along with most of her people, but rather she ended up in the hegemony of Emberseek at a young age due to the fact that her grandmother was a member of the hegemon's Varank guard. Unfortunately, Iriavik's grandmother fell in combat, however, and this left the young Varank stranded in a foreign environment far from the rest of her people, and understandably she felt quite alone and lost at that point. Iriavik, however, found solace in the presence of the beasts of war that hegemony had captured and intended to use for their own ends. And there, among the beasts, she found a companion for herself in the young Kurgan cub she named Cole. As Iriavik held no allegiance to the hegemony, she decided apparently to free her animal friends and take her life someplace else. And when the beasts were deployed into the unseen forest to combat the Sienan elves, Iriavik decided it was time to break them free and escape. And the rebellious Varank timed her great rescue operation to coincide with a Sienan ambush, and as a result she was able to free her friends and escape. But something happened during this escape that is not fully explained in the backstory, but there was a flash of light and Iriavik and her friend Cole were transported a great distance to the Hawthorn Point. And now she had a tattoo of a leafy tree at her back to remember this event by. And this is something that's going to be coming up with her card, this tattoo ability, and I am also very interested to hear later on what's the story behind all these events and what really happened there. I personally haven't played through the Warcrow Adventures as of right now entirely, but let's see if any more information comes out of there or maybe from CB in the future. As per usual, we have access to a Corvus Belli provided picture of the card over here, and we are going to be going through the basics next. Even though Iriavik cannot actually join any units, we are going to have to split this analysis piece into two different sections. First, I'm going to be taking a look at Iriavik simply as a solo model with no Cole accompanying her. And then we are going to be going over her again, and this time with Cole attached, and we will be making some observations on how the abilities and the tactical posture of Iriavik changes if you choose to add Cole to her, and what are some of the trade-offs that you are working with at that point, mainly the increased points cost and thus the necessity for her to achieve more during the battle. Iriavik is not a cheap model to include in your force even by herself. At 30 points she equals the points cost of the Prime Warrior and the Dark Master, so she is not cheap but not monstrously expensive obviously either. And as we are going to be seeing, her kit and her role mean that I don't think 30 points is all that much to pay for her in the end. As per usual for the Northern Tribes characters, Iriavik does provide you with a command token, but only a single one. So usually your force should end up having less command tokens at its disposal when it comes to comparing, for example, to your hegemony opponents. But you should have still enough to trigger the most valuable of your command skills when you need them the most. And this single command token is rather helpful since Iriavik herself does have a rather excellent command skill at her disposal, and she will receive another if you choose to bring Cole along. Iriavik's movement is the standard for a Varank troop, with a 4-3 basic movement and a 10 stride charge. The charge distance isn't going to be coming up all that much with solo Iriavik, and you get a higher charge value if you choose to include Cole, so there is not much to see there. The 4-3 standard movement is pretty nice since we are looking at a primarily a ranged attack piece, so getting to move and then leverage her range attack is pretty important, and with a decent enough, or I would even go as far as saying high movement value will surely help facilitate successful ranged attacks going forward. At 3 wounds, Iriavik is neither frail nor really sturdy. This is also something that we have seen with the likes of Varank Hersir, for example, but we'll be talking about her defensive properties in more detail a bit later on. At double orange willpower, Iriavik should usually be passing most of her willpower tests, but unlike somebody like Ormuk, she is actually lacking the elite keyword. So passing isn't going to be a sure thing, and if you are required to roll, for example, for intimidating 2, it's rather likely that Iriavik is not going to succeed in her test. The moral value of 2 is important since it not only affects how many times Iriavik can activate during a round, but also it's important for her command skill Touched by the Winter. As a named character, it's pretty obvious that you can only ever include a single Iriavik in your list, so let's go and move on. And then we get to the keywords section, and this is a rather busy one at that. There are 2 keywords that we have not received any explanations of so far, at least not that I am aware of. The first is colossal company, and there is a theory out there that this might relate to a fact that you might be able to, I don't know, create a company that's made up of these adventure characters, but there is no official confirmation of this as of right now. And Nemoros also, we have no idea what this will eventually mean. I'm somewhat surprised that the FAQ and update document we got did not reference Nemoros in any way, but okay. I suspect we will know at some point what this is supposed to do. But going forward on this analysis piece, I'm going to be just ignoring these 2 keywords. And if and when we get more information, you will just have to use your own judgment on how important these keywords end up being and how do they affect Iriavik as a pick for your lists. Iriavik is a Varank character, so in the future, if and when we get support options that affect Varanks specifically, she will be able to access those, but at the same time, as of right now, most of the certain culture related abilities that the Northern Tribes have access to actually are orc only abilities, so this ends up being more of a restriction than a boon as of right now. Iriavik also has a weak form of Dispel in the form of a single black dice, but as already stated, she lacks the elite keyword, so this is highly unlikely to affect enemy spellcasting in a major way, given that the black dice only will provide you a block symbol 25% of the time. At the same time, this spell ability might force, for example, an opponent that has only rolled a single uncancelled success on their roll to accept a point of tinge to make sure that they don't get unlucky and have their spell nullified by Iriavik's natural ability, so I guess there's that. And then we get to the really good and important stuff, and that is the fact that Iriavik, the restless pup, is a ambusher. Um, this is something that I was alluding to earlier when I said that I don't think 30 points is all that much for what you are getting and the role that she's going to be playing. Since effectively I think that you are getting so much out of this ambusher ability, even if we just take a look at how the dynamics of movement and positioning work in Warcrow. Because the more I play Iriavik, more I play the Dark Master, more I play the game generally, I come to realize how resource intensive it is to develop the positioning of your pieces in a way that they can be called upon when you need them, whether it's for engaging enemies or securing objectives for the scoring of the mission. And getting your models to your list is pretty much only half of the way there, since then you have to spend the time and effort to deploy and develop these pieces. But in the case of someone like Iriavik, you get to bypass all of that. You just invest the points in her and she's good to go, and you have her waiting in ambush for as long as it's necessary, and you at all times know that okay, if I need that ranged attack against that specific target, I basically have access to that at any point. Or as we are going to be seeing shortly, if I need to score that certain objective, I can just deploy Iriavik and get her in there and score the set objective rather trivially. So this is tremendously powerful and tremendously important ability, even though as we are going to be seeing, Iriavik all by herself isn't quite the assassin that the Dark Master is capable of being. Iriavik also has the preferred terrain rugged special rule, which means that she is not slowed down by rugged terrain, but rather she gains additional movement if she starts her activation adjacent to one. And also she does not get stopped by rugged terrain for the purposes of charging, for example. And as already said, this isn't going to be all that important with the solo Iriavik, but when we get to including Cole, that charging is going to become more important of a possibility, and at that point it's really nice to know that rugged terrain isn't going to foil your charge under any circumstances. Extremely importantly and curiously, Iriavik does have a conquest value of 1. And this, I think, is a big selling point of hers. Unlike the Dark Master, Iriavik can actually capture an objective that's being held by a 0 conquest enemy unit, or she can be used as an additional point of conquest if you are tying but not managing to capture an objective from the opponent. And as she has a 4-3 movement, which actually means effective 11 strides of movement on the battlefield, and you are allowed to position your ambusher 10 strides away from enemies when you deploy her. It's really difficult for your opponent to screen objectives in a way that will stop Iriavik from accessing them, and if they choose to invest the time and resources to do that, they are effectively boxing against the shadows, since you can just save Iriavik for later or use her someplace else, and you are printing money already at that point anyway. So I think this is extremely powerful an ability, or extremely powerful a facet of her gameplay, and at the same cost and at the same conquest value as a unit of Tundra Marauders with effectively higher mobility thanks to being a smaller footprint unit with the ambush ability, I have been finding in my games of late that if and when I am choosing between Iriavik and the Tundra Marauders, I'm actually reaching for Iriavik more and more because she can offer me that more or less automatic capture of an undefended objective. And as my opponents are starting to realize what I'm doing, it's forcing them more or less to leave some units at home just to safeguard their rear objectives, which is a win in and of itself. Alright, in a historical turn of events, it's time to discuss the first ranged attack breakdown of this channel's existence. I haven't analyzed the hegemony troops that have access to ranged attacks in any great detail until now. Maybe, I'm not saying yes, but maybe in the future. But as of right now, the Northern Tribes have their first ranged attacker in Iriavik, so let's talk about her. Iriavik's ranged attack, her javelin, is equipped with rather a decent range at 12 strides. Which when combined with her mobility and her ambush ability actually means that you can shoot and scoot with her quite effectively. So you can join the battle via ambush, slightly over 10 strides away from your opponent, throw a spear at them, and then immediately you get to move after. So that's really powerful. You can even potentially combine the ranged attack component and capturing an objective component in a single high value activation. So that's pretty great. Iriavik's ranged attack is made up of a red dice, 2 orange dice, and a yellow dice, and altogether they provide her on average with 3 successes, and she has a decent ceiling value of 5. I did not calculate any effective damage values based on her switch abilities, since they are rather intertwined and not all that not all that easy to trigger, and there's also the possibility of some outside help helping her trigger them, so I'm just going to be leaving you with that average and maximum damage output for now. Speaking of switch abilities, as you can see, this part of Iriavik's card is a rather busy one. If we start by taking a look at the hollow success, she is going to be providing you with usually at least 1, and with a maximum of 4, there's a possibility for quite a decent amount. If you are able to roll both a hollow success and a hollow special, you can combine the two for a displace 3 switch that will grant Iriavik even more mobility. Even though it has to be remembered that the hollow symbols are the rarest ones on the dice involved, so this shouldn't be triggering all that often, or at least not several times over per activation, unless you get really lucky / unlucky depending on what you're looking to achieve. Solid specials can be used by Iriavik in 2 different ways. If you chuck up whopping 3 specials, I think this is the first triple simple switch that I have seen on a card. Then you can cancel a block from your defender, but only if they already have the slowed state applied to them. So you need to either have used the other switch to first inflict the slowed state, or maybe some other unit, I don't know, maybe a soon to be released Varank ranged attacker unit who's capable of imposing slowed upon their enemies. If and when you can trigger this ability, you can increase the effective damage output of Iriavik, but at average 2 specials you aren't going to be getting even that single reduced block all of the time, or even most of the time, unless you are pushing, which will grant you just that single extra special symbol. And with a ceiling of 5 and with 6 in the case of a push modifier being applied, you can only trigger ever it maximum of twice, even if everything goes your way. So this isn't going to be a huge game changer, but rather a small buff here and there, or small squirt of additional damage here and there, to be fair. The last switch that Iriavik has access to is a special combined with a hollow special, and that induces the slowed state upon the enemy. This can stop enemies from counter-attacking Iriavik, chasing after her, or it can set up future attacks by her to make her javelins, or in the case of cold being present, her melee attacks more powerful. So a little bit of crowd control, a moderate amount of damage, and some additional potential mobility combine Iriavik's attack to be quite a versatile one, let's put it that way, even if it's not laser focused on dealing the greatest amount of damage possible. When Iriavik is fighting solo, her damage output in melee is extremely lackluster. She has a single automatic success, and she will be rolling a single red dice, but with no switch abilities, no push modifiers, and no elite. This is going to be providing you with on average 2 and at maximum 3 successes that your opponent is then free to cancel away with their blocks. So using a melee attack on solo Iriavik is probably going to be a exercise in futility and should only be reserved for absolutely desperate situations, or for example a situation where you need to cover so much ground to get to an objective that moving isn't just going to be cutting it, but there is a conveniently placed enemy that you can charge to make it so. Then I could see myself using this ability, but most of the time you are just better off moving and throwing a javelin at your opponent rather than charging and hitting them with one in melee. Iriavik's defense breakdown is also rather interesting. You are rolling 2 blue dice and 2 black dice, which will result in a highly variable defense roll that has a rather low floor of average block symbols. That is effectively 1.5, which I have chosen to round down to 1 to stop anyone from being too disappointed when they don't get more. But there is a high ceiling of potential for blocks in there if you get lucky with your roll. And this has the potential to greatly frustrate your opponent. If you choose to push, you will get an additional block symbol added to the roll, as well as a single solid special. This solid special is important in the fact that you are you have a double solid special switch on Iriavik that will cancel a success from the enemy if they have the slowed state when they are attacking you. So this is rather interesting, and it combines well with her javelin related switch ability that imposes the slowed state. Remember that if a slowed enemy charges or assaults you, they don't get to discard the slowed state until the end of their activation, so you are able to trigger this switch during the set activation to help keep Iriavik alive. positioning her in the middle of some rugged terrain at the end of her activation might already also be a good idea, since that will impose the slowed state on enemies coming after her, and at the same time she will be able to leverage preferred terrain rugged to get additional mobility the next time she's about to move, if she gets to do that later on. You do need to remember, if you decide to push for that additional block and the additional special symbol, that you are taking away potential from using Touched by the Winter, her command skill that we are going to be discussing shortly. Most of the time, I think it should be more or less of a wash between getting an automatic block symbol here and whether you are mitigating an extra wound via Touched by the Winter. But at the same time, there are two things to consider. Firstly, that additional special symbol that you get from pushing can end up paying dividends if you roll an odd number of special symbols on your roll and your opponent is suffering from the slowed state. And the second part is that if your opponent is going to be inflicting a lot of damage on you via automatic wound infliction mechanisms such as switch abilities, then it might be worthwhile not pushing for that additional block and special symbol, but rather saving your morale for taking more stress with Touched by the Winter. All in all, Iriavik is rolling quite a decent amount of specials on her average rolls, thanks to the presence of the two black dice and the blue dice not being the worst at providing specials either. So I really like the defensive metrics of Iriavik. Because this unreliability that you are getting with her does mean that while yes, sometimes she's going to be going down in a way that feels a bit too easy for your liking, there are also going to be quite a situation where your opponent is going to be frustrated by the fact that your not all that expensive model is rolling really well on defense and foiling their efforts to take her out in a resource effective way. And this is a nice place for a model to be. I would rather have a cheaper, more accessible model that has the potential to roll high or roll low depending on the situation, rather than paying a lot more or even a bit more for a model that is more consistent, since there are also going to be counters for consistent models out there. And this leads us nicely to her next defensive ability that's going to help her stay on the field for a longer time than a model of her points value and her role should be able to, and that's Touched by Winter. Touched by the Winter is a command skill that's activated when resolving the combat that Iriavik is part of. And there is actually no round cap on how many times you can access this ability, even though as it is feeding off the stress of Iriavik, or rather her morale value, there is a hard limit on how much you can get done with this ability per round anyway. The ability causes the slowed state upon the enemy when it's activated, and I don't think it's quite clear from the wording whether it's supposed to inflict this on just the enemy that performed the attack or all the enemies if there are several engaging Iriavik, but I don't think the latter is going to be coming up all that often, so I don't think it's all that important one way or the other, especially since the second element of this ability is actually what we are usually going to be using the command token for, and that is that Iriavik can take up to 2 points of stress to ignore a wound for every point of stress incurred in this way. So effectively, a Iriavik with no stress or Iriavik with no stress can take as many as 5 wounds before going down, and then when you combine with that the decent amount of defense dice that she's rolling, she can be a surprisingly sturdy model for her cost and roll and her type. So that's pretty awesome. If you find a way to reset her stress between uh, enemy attacks, then obviously you are able to get more mileage out of this ability. So look for situations where you can rest with Iriavik while at the same time achieving whatever else you were achieving with her, since this will effectively reset touched by the winter and allow her to take further, ignore further wounds going forward. So I really like this ability a lot. It puts the onus on the opponent to try and find a way to deal with Iriavik or not, and then even if she is full of stress behind enemy lines, as long as she's alive, she's a threat both in the traditional damage dealing sense, but also in the scenario play sense. And I really enjoy the idea of my opponent having to grapple with those tough decisions during the game. Iriavik also has two innate passive abilities, and the first one is called Restless Pup. This ability makes Iriavik immune to the slowed state, and as such, this ability has quite some overlap with preferred terrain rugged. I don't think this ability is going to be coming up all that often. As of right now, there aren't all that many abilities with the hegemony forces that inflict load anyway. But then again, if you are playing into a mirror match, and if and when we are going to be seeing more slowed inducing attacks and abilities going forward, this might come up more. Where I see this ability coming especially valuable is in situations where it can be used to break up a ability combination. For example, Iriavik herself is preying partly on the fact that the enemy has the slowed state upon them. So if the enemy has a doppelganger Iriavik or some other unit that can take advantage of slowed enemies, you are able to soft counter such abilities by breaking the chain of state infliction and capitalizing on the set state. But as it's only this single state that Iriavik is going to be immune to, I don't think it's going to be all that of a big of a deal, but hey, it's something to keep in mind. And then we get to the background portion of Iriavik and how it affects her gameplay. As already said, Iriavik escaped with Cole in a flash of blinding light that ended up leaving her in Hawthorne Point. And after the event, a leafy tree tattoo was adorning her back, and this is now that ability, Totem of the White Razura. It's a passive ability that effectively activates once per game if and when you choose to bring Iriavik into the battle via the ambush ability. Totem of the White Razura causes a willpower test on enemy units within 12 strides of Iriavik, and all of those who fail will suffer the frightened state. Firstly, having a ability that is preying upon your enemy's willpower is going to leave a lot of keys in the hands of your opponent, since if and when they are leveraging character attachments, maybe high command abilities or other such passive buffs, it's highly unlikely that you are going to be able to scare too many enemies with this totem ability. Second, frightened in and of itself does not actually do anything. You still have to trigger that willpower test one way or the other for this ability to become important. And even if you manage to get the situation up to that point, there is still the possibility that the enemy simply passes their test and okay, well, that was that. So I don't think this is a moneymaker of an ability, but rather an unreliable ability that can sometimes help a little bit, even a little bit in a crucial way by helping you break an important enemy unit at the right time. But as this ability is so really unreliable, you really shouldn't be building your battle plans around it unless you are looking to do something really cheeky like combining this and Spirit of Thermapleurus, but again, a bit too unreliable for my liking. One thing to keep in mind with the Totem of the White Rasura is the fact that it will affect your own units also. So you need to choose a location where to bring Iriavik in that does not enforce this ability upon your own units. But in the end, it should be rather easy for you to choose such a position. Just bring Iriavik in more than 12 strides away from your own troops, or use the geometry of the units and the terrain involved to screen your own units from this effect. Since there is no lost tag attached, this ability will only affect the units that can actually see Iriavik, so there is this way also of countering the ill effects on your own units when deploying her. Okay, that gets us nicely to our halfway house of analyzing Iriavik as a solo model. All in all, I think that Iriavik is a competent ranged attacker who gets more value out of her ranged attacks via her ability to target more vulnerable and or important enemy targets thanks to her ambush keyword. Her high mobility that comes from several different factors and her conquest value of 1 means that she can be a surprisingly dangerous scenario play element that your opponent has to respect and that you can use when you get the most value out of her. Iriavik also offers your force with some light crowd control effects, but these are not all that reliable and easy to trigger, so they are probably best seen as potential add-ons rather than the reason that you are bringing her in. As already stated, Iriavik has excellent maneuverability and she also has access to a large number of defense dice and some pretty nice survivability enhancing abilities like Touched by the Winter, which means that Iriavik can be quite a difficult model to counter for her points cost even if your opponent manages to get into combat with her. So all in all, I think that the solo version of Iriavik feels like a great throw-in model to add as the last piece to your force. And to be totally honest, I have started to add her pretty early on these days, so that I have the 1-2 punch of a Dark Master as an assassin and Iriavik as a scenario play element when I'm looking to get the upper hand on my opponents. So all in all, I really can't I can praise Iriavik enough as a solo model. I think we are starting now to see more and more this feeling and this tactical approach that the backstory of the Northern Tribes was alluding to, a pack of hunters springing an attack on the enemy and the different parts of the hunting party working together to bring down their foe. And Iriavik is an important part of this way of playing, I feel, going forward. You can use your slow-moving and ferociously fighting infantry units such as orc hunters and the battle guard to approach the enemy from the front, tie them down and track them down in melee, and then you have access to pieces like Iriavik that can then spring the ambush, throw in some additional damage, maybe induce some crowd control and score the objectives so that your opponent doesn't get to take the day just by holding back the ferocious main assault that you are at the moment trying to perform. So I really love the way Iriavik plays, and she is quickly becoming one of my favorite models in the entire Northern Tribes faction. Okay, that's it on the solo Iriavik. Now let's talk about her when accompanied by Cole. Whoa, this is looking like it's shaping up to be a really long episode, so let's hastily get down to Cole and what she adds to Iriavik, and let's see how quickly we could wrap this one up. So let's start with the basics of adding Cole to Iriavik. Firstly, if we take a look at the points cost, Cole costs 20 points to include, which is a hefty investment. It changes the whole package from 30 points to 50 points, and then we are looking at a really high expense model that we are going to have shoulder more of a workload also if we are going to make back those points and get a return on our investment. There is a card related to Cole that has the rules for companions in it, and there was also a small text update in the latest update and FAQ document. The important thing is that Cole is basically a add-on to Iriavik, and I find it easiest to think of him as a unit that's joining Iriavik rather than a character joining a unit. Basically, Cole can never be the target of ranged attacks or command abilities, so more or less they are a token, a marker, except I think you can charge and engage Cole and thus engage the entire unit, but that's basically it. And as you can see from the profile of this part of the card, Cole is not a model in and of himself, but rather he's just a addition to Iriavik that grants her additional stats and abilities, but if Iriavik ever goes down, then Cole goes down with him, or rather her, sorry. Here I have combined the Corvuspelli provided cards for Iriavik and Cole so that we can see what this Kurgan adds to our Varank Adventurer. Firstly, as already discussed, the cost addition of Cole means that you are paying a whopping 50 points for the duo, so you really need them to achieve way more than would have been acceptable for a 30-point Iriavik earlier on. Cole increases the movement characteristics of Iriavik, granting her effectively a single stride additional movement on her first movement value and also 2 additional strides on her charge distance. As already talked about, the charge distance isn't all that important on the solo Iriavik, since she isn't going to be engaging enemies in melee if she can help it, but with this duo, melee is an important part of what they are going to be doing. I'm even willing to argue that it's the main reason to bring them, so in this instance the excellent charge distance of 12 plus 2 strides is really important. Here's where Iriavik's ability to ignore the rugged terrain's restrictions on charging also becomes way more important. Cole adds another wound to Iriavik, which brings her total to 4, which makes her even more difficult a model to take out in a timely manner. And as we are going to be seeing, Cole has also a small secondary durability improvement attached to taking him. Cole also adds a yellow dice to Iriavik's willpower, bringing her grand total to 2 orange and a yellow, and that's Drago levels of willpower right there. So Iriavik, accompanied by Cole, isn't going to be faced by most of the things that she's going to be experiencing on the field of battle. An important note, however, is the fact that Cole does not improve Iriavik's ranged attack power in absolutely any way, which means that whenever you are using the duo to perform a ranged attack, you are paying the extra 20 points, but you aren't getting anything out of that points cost when it comes to adding additional value to your attack itself. So if you are looking to incorporate Iriavik into your force primarily as a ranged combat asset, then bringing Cole isn't going to be worthwhile most of the time, but rather if you are willing to pivot her into a more melee and assassin oriented role, then Cole is a good add to have. I have recalculated the melee attack of Iriavik entirely here because of how transformative the effects of Cole are in this regard. As you can see, the average amount of successes that Cole and Iriavik are going to be rolling goes up to 3 and the maximum goes up to 5, and Cole also adds a push modifier that allows the addition of yet another automatic success to the roll. So Cole brings Iriavik's melee attack power into a substantial level, but we do have to note that the ceiling damage isn't all that high here, even if you are pushing for that extra effect. Cole provides Iriavik with a single special melee switch that imposes the slowed state upon the enemy, which is important because it feeds Iriavik's defensive switch if the enemy will retaliate with a melee attack, and also it feeds the second switch of Cole, that is a hollow success switch that inflicts an automatic wound against the enemy. You do have to remember, however, that the red dice and the orange dice are the ones that are less likely to provide you with hollow successes, and the yellow dice would actually be the best one for this. So you are really only looking at a single facet with a single hollow success symbol on each of those 3 dice. The nice thing is that the orange dice do have the ability, and the red dice also has the ability to provide you with a combination of a special and a hollow success symbol, which means that you get to trigger the slowed state or you potentially get to trigger the slowed state and the resulting automatic wound on the same dice. Iriavik also has a secondary melee skill that she gains through the addition of Cole, but let's talk a little bit more about that soon enough. When it comes to the defensive efforts improved by Cole, it's mostly retaliatory in nature. Cole adds a single red dice to the defense roll of Iriavik, helping her potentially retaliate against enemies engaging her in melee, and also Cole adds a double special switch that inflicts an automatic wound against enemies suffering from the slowed state. And he provides a weak push modifier that allows Cole to produce yet another special symbol added to the mix, but I don't think this is going to be worthwhile all that often, since the opportunity cost of stressing for that single special is not suffering a wound through the use of Touched by the Winter, so I don't think that's going to be coming up except under truly dire circumstances. The problem with this double special switch that Cole has access to is the fact that it competes directly with Iriavik's own defensive switch that allows her to cancel successes from the opponent. So you are either inflicting damage or you are taking less damage, but you can't do both. So when Iriavik is rolling hollow successes or hollow specials on her defense roll, she has no capability of making use of them, but at the same time there are two specials that are fighting for the solid specials that you do receive. All in all, if you are willing to use these, willing and able, that is, against a slowed enemy, to use these special symbols for damage infliction, then Cole can add on average 2 points and at maximum 5 points of damage to your retaliatory capability, and there is a possibility of yet another one if you push for additional performance twice. But at the same time, I don't think this is going to be the main selling point of Cole, but rather it's a handy option for you to have if Iriavik is engaged in a combat where she has no realistic chance of surviving, so at least she can bloody the nose of the enemy as she goes out. The secondary offensive ability that I was referring to earlier is called Kurgan, and it's a passive ability granted by Cole, and it allows Iriavik to fix a single dice from each of her melee attack rolls. And I would imagine that this usually takes the form of fixing a orange dice to have a special and a hollow success symbol on it, so that you can ensure the triggering of slow upon your enemy and cause an automatic wound against them. And if the enemy is already suffering from the slowed state, then you are probably wanting to fix that red dice for a double success. Obviously, if and when the enemy has abilities such as Medic that allows them to ignore some of the automatic wounds that you are inflicting upon them, then the value of fixing for that slowed plus hollow success is going to be lessened, and then you might also choose to go for the double success red dice, even though the enemy has not yet suffered the slowed effect. But you need to consider the situation on deciding what to do over here. Kurgan ensures that while Iriavik's damage ceiling, even when accompanied by her companion, isn't all that high, her damage floor is pretty excellent. She should be consistently doing several points of damage upon the enemy, so if and when she can target weak defense enemy models for destruction, she should be successful most of the time. The big moneymaker of an ability when it comes to adding Cole is a second command skill that he brings to the table, and it's called Siblings Bond. This command skill is capped at 1 use per round, and as we are going to be going through the effects, you will shortly see why this is the case. When you trigger the Siblings Bond, you get to place Iriavik and thus Cole 8 strides, and then if you end up engaged with an enemy unit, you get to perform a melee attack against them, and if you do not engage with the enemy, then you get to remove a state from Iriavik. This ability is tremendously powerful, and usually I would imagine it's going to be seeing use as an offensive tool that offers a explosive damage output of effectively double attack from the Iriavik and Cole duo, which is a really rare ability to have in this game, at least as of so far. It's also a simple to add additional pseudo activation that you can add to your force without needing any additional support to make it happen. What this ability allows you to do is that if you first choose to activate the duo in a traditional sense, you get to move, shoot, and then perform a melee attack via the siblings bond after the blaze effect, or you can even perform two melee attacks. Where you can use the first activation to charge, for example, something, hit it, and then you can use the siblings bond to blaze and attack yet again. Since using a command skill is not an action, you are allowed to use this ability even when you are engaged in melee, so Iriavik can cover a tremendous amount of ground by ambushing in, charging something with her increased charge distance of 12 plus 2 strides, and then after hitting the target, regardless of whether she takes it out or not, she can then apply the siblings bond in order to teleport effectively further away and attack yet again. So this is a really awesome ability if and when you find soft enough targets to make good use out of it. The last ability that Cole provides is called Who's a Good Boy, and it's a passive ability that triggers at the end of each round. The main component of this ability is that it allows Iriavik to shed an extra point of stress, effectively meaning that if she is at full 2 stress, she can go down to 0 when it comes time to shed stress at the end of the round. And this is really helpful since it will help her empower Touched by the Winter in the subsequent rounds, subsequent activations. If, for example, our opponent gets to activate first and attack Iriavik in an effort to take her down before she can leverage the siblings bond for the next round, having some capacity to take additional stress to ignore wounds via Touched by the Winter is going to be helping you out quite a lot. Who's a Good Boy also allows Iriavik to roll a single orange dice at the end of the round, and if you manage to roll a hollow special, then you get to heal a wound from Iriavik. And as I'm sure you know by now, the orange dice has a 25% chance of providing you with a hollow special symbol, so every 4 times that you are rolling for this ability, you should be recuperating a single wound. So this is a nifty ability that can help you get more out of the duo, but it's really not one of the big reasons that you are choosing to incorporate Cole if you choose to bring Iriavik anyway. And this all leads us to the final analysis, this time with Iriavik and Cole working together. Adding Cole does grant Iriavik some additional mobility, durability, crowd control resistance, and also turns her from primarily a ranged skirmisher type combatant into a powerful, or rather a reliable melee assassin also. The Siblings Bond is a plug-and-play ability that allows you to incorporate additional activation generating ability to your force without needing any additional force components, and also it allows you to perform a explosive attack that will allow you to reap the benefits of a double attack during a single activation, which is quite a rare feat in Warcrow as of right now. At the same time, it must be said that bringing Cole does almost double Iriavik's points cost, which will unfortunately necessitate more aggressive plays, and it will require the Northern Tribes player to be able to get more out of the duo in order to have the investment be worthwhile. In a situation where you are doing so well with the rest of your force that it's not required for Iriavik and Cole to do all that much, I would argue that you are just then using them to win more in a situation where you were winning anyway. so I don't find this line of thinking to be all that compelling. But if you have a plan in which you are able to have Iriavik and Cole play a really important part, they are able to assassinate a important enemy piece or pieces consistently, or slow down your opponent's attack in a dramatic way, then by all means their inclusion is for sure warranted. You also do need to remember that while Iriavik and Cole Duo's improved melee attack performance is really dangerous and hard to defend against, it's also not all that high ceiling. So you are not supposed to be attacking frontline enemy units head on if you have the choice, but rather you should be using the mobility of the duo to get otherwise hard to get kills that rely against enemies that are relying on positioning and distance to keep themselves safe rather than traditional defensive metrics. I also think that Iriavik and Cole do fulfill more or less the same role as the Dark Master does as a ambushing assassin piece, even though obviously they are more tactically versatile thanks to the fact that they do have a conquest value, they have higher mobility, they do have a ranged attack element, and so forth. But at the same time, they are 20 points more expensive, and the Dark Master does provide your force with the sharp perception ability, which, as per the permanent update, is going to be usable through the entire game. So I am not so much seeing Iriavik or even Iriavik and Cole as a substitute for the Dark Master, but rather these two tactical elements can both be included in your force to potentially even work together against the same enemy. If you, for example, bring the Dark Master in to attack something and the enemy then responds with a counter attack, then if the Dark Master survives, they are already engaged in melee, and you can then potentially bring in Iriavik and Cole to take advantage of the situation. I also think that Iriavik and Cole as a duo are more match-up dependent choices than single Iriavik, solo Iriavik would be. So I think that it's important not only to be aware of the strategy that you are looking to implement them as a part of, but also what type of units and strategies your opponent is going to be bringing to the battlefield, and how can you utilize Iriavik and Cole to stop them from succeeding at what they are trying to do. All in all, I really love the way the Warcrow Adventures character, or in this case rather characters, in Iriavik and Cole have been translated to the tabletop, and I'm really looking forward to fielding them yet again in my next game soon to follow. With this rather long-winded take on our Varank adventurer and her Kurgan friend, I'm going to end this episode. Thank you everybody for listening, and hope to see you again soon enough. Safe travels, everyone.